On a cool Tuesday morning in downtown Charlotte, North Carolina, sunlight poured through the towering glass walls of First Carolina National Bank, casting long reflections across polished marble floors where customers moved quietly from one counter to another. The atmosphere carried the familiar rhythm of an ordinary business day, the soft tapping of keyboards blending with polite greetings and the occasional rustle of paperwork. No one expected that within minutes the peaceful lobby would become the stage for a moment every witness would remember for the rest of their lives. Among the steady flow of customers walked an older black man whose appearance drew little attention at first. He wore a faded green baseball cap pulled low over his forehead, a simple green jacket that had clearly seen years of use, and beneath it a neatly pressed black striped button-down shirt. In one hand, he carried an old leather portfolio whose worn edges suggested decades of careful ownership rather than wealth or prestige. His pace was calm, unhurried, and deliberate, as though every step reflected years of discipline instead of urgency. His name was Leon Richardson, though no one in the building recognized it yet. To the people around him, he looked like another retiree stopping by the bank to handle personal business before lunch. A young teller noticed him waiting patiently in line and smiled politely before returning to assist another customer. Across the lobby, two businessmen briefly glanced in his direction before continuing their conversation about quarterly earnings. A mother gently reminded her young son not to run across the polished floor. The morning unfolded with complete normalcy until Leon quietly placed his portfolio on the counter and handed over his identification. "Good morning," he said with an easy smile. "I'd like to authorize a transfer into a Veterans Education Foundation." His voice carried the quiet confidence of someone who never felt the need to raise it. The teller, Sophia Mitchell, entered the account information into her computer. At first, everything appeared routine, but within seconds her expression changed. The amount scheduled for transfer displayed far more zeros than she had expected, triggering an automatic security notification that required additional verification. She apologized with professional courtesy and explained that the bank security department needed a few minutes to confirm the transaction. Leon nodded without complaint. "Take all the time you need," he replied. "Accuracy matters." Sophia appreciated his patience, but the electronic alert had already activated the bank's security protocol. Within moments, a call requesting police assistance reached nearby patrol units. Just outside, Officer Adam Cooper finished speaking with dispatch before stepping through the bank's revolving doors. The message he received was brief, but enough to shape his first impression before he ever entered the lobby. Possible financial fraud. Elderly male attempting unusually large transfer. As his eyes scanned the room, they settled almost immediately on Leon Richardson, standing quietly beside the counter, still wearing the faded green cap and weather jacket. Without asking a single question, Adam's expression hardened. He walked directly toward Leon with the certainty of a man who believed he already knew the entire story. Several customers instinctively stepped aside as the officer stopped only a few feet away. The room grew noticeably quieter. Then, loud enough for everyone nearby to hear, Officer Adam Cooper looked directly at Leon Richardson and said, "I think you're trying to scam this bank." Leon Richardson did not answer immediately. Instead, he looked calmly at Officer Adam Cooper with the same steady expression he had worn since walking through the front doors. There was no panic in his eyes, no frustration in his voice, only the quiet patience of someone who had spent a lifetime refusing to let other people define his character. Around them, conversations faded into whispers as customers slowly realized that something unusual was unfolding. The faint sound of counting machines and printers seemed to disappear beneath the growing silence. Sophia Mitchell glanced nervously between the officer and Leon, hoping the misunderstanding could be resolved with a simple explanation. "Sir," she said, carefully, "our system only requested additional verification because of the transaction amount. We have not confirmed any wrongdoing." Adam barely acknowledged her. His attention remained fixed on the older man standing before him. "People pretending to have money usually stay calm too," he replied confidently. "That does not impress me." Leon gently folded his hands in front of him. "Officer, if there's a question about my account, the bank is welcome to verify everything." His voice remained even, carrying neither anger nor fear. "I have nowhere else to be." That unexpected response only seemed to strengthen Adam's assumptions. In his mind, confidence was another performance, another trick used by someone hoping to avoid scrutiny. He stepped slightly closer and looked at the worn leather portfolio resting on the counter. The faded edges, the ordinary clothing, and the weathered green cap all reinforced the picture he had already created before speaking a single word to Leon. Confirmation bias quietly did the rest. Emily Carter, the bank manager, emerged from her office after receiving notice of the security alert. She quickly reviewed the information displayed on Sophia's monitor. The account had existed for decades. The available balance comfortably exceeded the transfer amount. Every identification field matched perfectly. There was nothing obviously suspicious in the financial records themselves. Yet the security protocol still required outside confirmation because of the unusual size of the charitable transfer. Emily approached with a professional smile. "Mr. Richardson, thank you for your patience. We are simply completing our standard verification procedures." Leon nodded politely. "I appreciate your professionalism." Adam crossed his arms. Professionalism also means protecting people from fraud. Several customers exchanged uneasy looks. One elderly woman quietly whispered to her husband, "He does not seem dangerous at all." Another customer lowered his phone after briefly considering recording the scene, deciding instead to simply watch. The atmosphere inside the bank had changed. It was no longer about a delayed transaction. It had become a room, filled with assumptions waiting to be proven right or terribly wrong. Emily continued reviewing the account details. One notation near the bottom caught her attention. The account contained a series of recurring donations to military family organizations, scholarship funds, and veterans hospitals stretching back many years. She looked up at Leon with growing curiosity. "Sir, may I ask what inspired today's donation?" Leon smiled softly. Every scholarship creates opportunities that last longer than medals ever could. The answer was simple, sincere, and unexpectedly thoughtful. Even Sophia found herself smiling. Adam, however, remained unconvinced. "Nice speech," he said. "Anyone can rehearse a story." Leon slowly reached toward his jacket pocket before stopping himself. "Officer, I was about to retrieve another identification card, but I would rather avoid any misunderstanding. If you prefer, I will wait until you ask." His deliberate restraint surprised everyone nearby. Adam interpreted it differently. "That is because you know whatever you are hiding will eventually come out." Leon met his eyes without raising his voice. The truth always comes out. The only question is whether people are willing to recognize it when it arrives. The silence inside the bank grew heavier with every passing second. Customers who had originally planned to finish a quick errand now found themselves frozen in place, watching a confrontation that seemed increasingly uncomfortable. Nobody spoke above a whisper. Even the children waiting with their parents sensed the unusual tension filling the spacious lobby. Officer Adam Cooper believed he was in complete control of the situation. Years of responding to emergency calls had taught him to trust his instincts. And in this moment, his instincts had become stronger than the facts sitting on the bank manager's computer screen. He looked directly at Leon Richardson and said, "I want to see everything inside your portfolio." Leon gave a small nod without hesitation. "Of course." He carefully opened the worn leather case and slowly placed its contents on the polished counter where everyone could see them. There were neatly organized financial documents, a checkbook, reading glasses inside a protective case, a leather notebook filled with handwritten notes, and several envelopes addressed to military scholarship foundations. Nothing appeared hidden. Nothing appeared threatening. Emily Carter quietly examined the paperwork while Sophia Mitchell compared names and account numbers with the information displayed in the banking system. Every document matched perfectly. Still, Adam remained focused on proving his original conclusion. His eyes stopped on a framed photograph tucked inside one folder. It showed Leon standing beside several men and women wearing military uniforms. Adam picked up the photograph and looked at it with a skeptical smile. "Interesting picture," he said. "People can print almost anything these days." Leon answered calmly, "That photograph has been with me for many years." Adam shook his head. "Anyone can say that." Several customers exchanged uneasy glances. An older veteran, wearing a faded service cap, quietly studied the photograph from a distance. Something about Leon's posture in the picture seemed familiar, but he could not quite place it. Emily continued reviewing another document and noticed official letterhead connected to charitable programs supporting families of fallen service members. Every page carried authentic security markings commonly used by government agencies. She looked toward Adam. "Officer Cooper, everything we have verified so far appears legitimate." Adam answered without taking his eyes off Leon. "Appearances can be convincing." Leon remained perfectly still. His breathing never changed. His expression never hardened. Imagine standing there while strangers debated your honesty without knowing the first chapter of your life. Imagine hearing your integrity questioned after spending decades building it one decision at a time. That kind of restraint cannot be learned overnight. It is earned through years of discipline. Adam noticed another identification holder resting inside the portfolio. "What is that?" Leon glanced toward it. "Another identification card." "Then show it." Leon gently placed his hand beside the holder, but did not open it. Instead, he looked toward Emily before returning his attention to the officer. "I would prefer that the verification process follow the bank's procedures." Adam frowned it. "Or maybe you are buying yourself time." Leon answered with quiet confidence. "No, officer. I am giving everyone here the opportunity to let facts speak before assumptions do." The words lingered across the silent lobby. Emily felt an increasing sense that something important had not yet been uncovered. Sophia noticed the official account history stretching back more than 30 years without a single irregularity. Even a veteran standing near the entrance could not stop studying Leon's face, convinced he had seen him somewhere before. Yet Adam refused to step away from the conclusion he had reached within seconds of entering the building. He folded his arms once again and spoke loudly enough for everyone nearby to hear. "Until I know exactly who you are, I am treating this like an attempted fraud." Leon looked directly at him with the same calm dignity that had never left his face. Then, with a quiet voice that carried through the entire lobby, he said, "If knowing who I am is truly important to you, then perhaps it is time for someone else to answer that question." Leon Richardson let the silence settle before speaking again. His voice remained calm, almost gentle, carrying the quiet confidence of a man who had never needed to prove his worth by speaking the loudest. "Officer," he said, "I would appreciate it if you contacted your commanding officer before making any further conclusions." Adam Cooper let out a short laugh that echoed across the lobby. "My chief does not leave his office because someone asks politely." A few customers exchanged uncertain looks. The confidence in Adam's tone suggested the conversation was already over in his mind. Leon simply nodded. "Then perhaps tell him my name." Adam shuruk dismissivedi. "Why would I waste his time with this?" Leon answered without the slightest hint of irritation. "Because every decision deserves the truth before the judgment." Those words lingered in the air longer than anyone expected. Emily Carter studied Leon's face more carefully than before. There was something unusual about the way he carried himself. His posture was perfectly straight without appearing rigid. His eyes remained relaxed, even under public scrutiny. He never glanced toward the exits. He never searched for sympathy from the growing crowd. It was the quiet discipline of someone who had spent an entire lifetime remaining composed under pressure. Emily turned slightly toward Adam. "Officer Cooper, perhaps we should finish the verification process before drawing any final conclusions." Adam shook his head. "Every minute we hesitate gives a fraud another chance." Sophia Mitchell looked once more at the account history on her screen. Decades of legitimate banking activity. Regular charitable contributions. Long-standing investments. Every verification request continued returning positive results. She quietly spoke. Everything the bank can verify internally is consistent. Adam barely acknowledged her words. His attention never left Leon. Consistency can be manufactured. The elderly veteran, standing near the entrance, slowly stepped forward. He looked at Leon with increasing curiosity before speaking carefully. "Excuse me, sir. Have we met before at Fort Liberty?" Leon smiled politely. "It has been many years since I visited there." The veteran narrowed his eyes, searching his memory. "I knew your face seemed familiar." Adam interrupted before the conversation could continue. "Please step back, sir. We are conducting official business." The veteran complied without argument, but his expression suggested growing concern rather than suspicion. Meanwhile, Emily quietly excused herself and walked into her office. She decided to make a verification call through one of the military liaison contacts the bank occasionally used for large charitable foundations connected to veterans. She explained only the facts: large transfer, government-related donation, customer requesting additional identity confirmation. She expected the process to take several minutes. Instead, the person on the other end immediately asked for one detail. "What is the customer's full name?" Emily answered softly, "Leon Richardson." There was a brief silence before the voice became noticeably more serious. "Please remain on the line." Back in the lobby, Adam folded his arms again. He looked around at the watching customers as though inviting them to agree with his judgment. Some avoided eye contact. Others quietly questioned whether the situation had gone too far. Imagine standing in a crowded room where strangers formed opinions before learning a single fact about your life. Imagine choosing dignity instead of anger, while every assumption seemed to move against you. That kind of restraint often reveals more strength than any display of authority ever could. Leon glanced toward the large American flag displayed near the bank entrance. His expression softened for only a moment before returning to its calm stillness. He had spent decades serving the ideals represented by that flag, and yet he understood that respect for those ideals sometimes required patience during uncomfortable moments like this. Seconds later, Emily stepped out of her office with a different expression on her face. The color had drained slightly from it. She looked first at Leon, then at Officer Adam Cooper, and finally toward the telephone still resting in her hand. "Officer," she said carefully, "I believe there is someone who insists on speaking with you immediately." Leon Richardson let the silence settle before speaking again. His voice remained calm, almost gentle, carrying the quiet confidence of a man who had never needed to prove his worth by speaking the loudest. "Officer," he said, "I would appreciate it if you contacted your commanding officer before making any further conclusions." Adam Cooper let out a short laugh that echoed across the lobby. "My chief does not leave his office because someone asks politely." A few customers exchanged uncertain looks. The confidence in Adam's tone suggested the conversation was already over in his mind. Leon simply nodded. "Then perhaps tell him my name. Adam Shuruk dismissiveri. Why would I waste his time with this?" Leon answered without the slightest hint of irritation. "Because every decision deserves the truth before the judgment." Those words lingered in the air longer than anyone expected. Emily Carter studied Leon's face more carefully than before. There was something unusual about the way he carried himself. His posture was perfectly straight without appearing rigid. His eyes remained relaxed, even under public scrutiny. He never glanced toward the exits. He never searched for sympathy from the growing crowd. It was the quiet discipline of someone who had spent an entire lifetime remaining composed under pressure. Emily turned slightly toward Adam. "Officer Cooper, perhaps we should finish the verification process before drawing any final conclusions." Adam shook his head. "Every minute we hesitate gives a fraud another chance." Sophia Mitchell looked once more at the account history on her screen. Decades of legitimate banking activity. Regular charitable contributions. Long-standing investments. Every verification request continued returning positive results. She quietly spoke. "Everything the bank can verify internally is consistent." Adam barely acknowledged her words. His attention never left Leon. Consistency can be manufactured. The elderly veteran, standing near the entrance, slowly stepped forward. He looked at Leon with increasing curiosity before speaking carefully. "Excuse me, sir. Have we met before at Fort Liberty?" Leon smiled politely. "It has been many years since I visited there." The veteran narrowed his eyes, searching his memory. "I knew your face seemed familiar." Adam interrupted before the conversation could continue. "Please step back, sir. We are conducting official business." The veteran complied without argument, but his expression suggested growing concern rather than suspicion. Meanwhile, Emily quietly excused herself and walked into her office. She decided to make a verification call through one of the military liaison contacts the bank occasionally used for large charitable foundations connected to veterans. She explained only the facts. Large transfer, government-related donation, customer requesting additional identity confirmation. She expected the process to take several minutes. Instead, the person on the other end immediately asked for one detail. "What is the customer's full name?" Emily answered softly, "Leon Richardson." There was a brief silence before the voice became noticeably more serious. "Please remain on the line." Back in the lobby, Adam folded his arms again. He looked around at the watching customers as though inviting them to agree with his judgment. Some avoided eye contact. Others quietly questioned whether the situation had gone too far. Imagine standing in a crowded room where strangers formed opinions before learning a single fact about your life. Imagine choosing dignity instead of anger while every assumption seemed to move against you. That kind of restraint often reveals more strength than any display of authority ever could. Leon glanced toward the large American flag displayed near the bank entrance. His expression softened for only a moment before returning to its calm stillness. He had spent decades serving the ideals represented by that flag, and yet he understood that respect for those ideals sometimes required patience during uncomfortable moments like this. Seconds later, Emily stepped out of her office with a different expression on her face. The color had drained slightly from it. She looked first at Leon, then at Officer Adam Cooper, and finally toward the telephone still resting in her hand. "Officer," she said carefully, "I believe there is someone who insists on speaking with you immediately." Adam Cooper looked at the telephone in Emily Carter's hand without moving. His confident expression barely changed. In his mind, this was simply another manager trying to slow down an investigation that he believed he had already solved. He walked to the counter, took the receiver, and spoke in a steady voice. "Officer Adam Cooper speaking." The voice on the other end remained calm and professional. "Officer, this is Colonel Benjamin Ellis from the United States Army Office of Public Affairs. We have received a request to verify the identity of Mr. Leon Richardson." Adam glanced toward Leon before answering. "That is correct. We have reason to believe he may be misrepresenting himself." There was a brief pause. "What exactly has Mr. Richardson claimed?" "Adam Fronit. He has not claimed anything. I simply need confirmation before allowing this situation to continue." The colonel answered carefully. "Please remain where you are. Someone from your department's chain of command has already been notified." Adam raised an eyebrow. "That seems unnecessary." "It is entirely necessary," the colonel replied before ending the call. Adam slowly lowered the receiver, clearly unimpressed. "Interesting," he muttered. "They're taking this very seriously." Leon remained exactly where he had been since the beginning, his weathered green cap casting a small shadow across his face as he quietly observed everything unfolding around him. He showed no sign of satisfaction, no trace of triumph, only patience. Emily searched Leon's expression for some explanation, but all she found was remarkable composure. Sophia Mitchell continued refreshing the verification screen on her computer. New confirmation notices kept appearing one after another. Every security marker cleared successfully. Every financial record aligned perfectly. Every identification number matched official databases available to the bank. She quietly looked toward Emily and whispered, "Everything checks out." Emily nodded slowly, her concern shifting away from Leon and toward the growing possibility that a terrible misunderstanding had taken place. Across the lobby, Customers no longer looked at Leon with suspicion. Instead, many had begun watching Officer Cooper. Their attention had quietly shifted from the man being questioned to the man asking the questions. The elderly veteran near the entrance finally stepped closer once again. "Officer," he said respectfully, "I served for more than 30 years. I cannot explain why yet, but I truly believe you should slow this down." Adam offered a polite but dismissive smile. "Sir, I appreciate your service, but I know how these situations work." The veteran simply nodded and stepped back. He had learned long ago that experience could guide judgment, but pride often refused to listen. Minutes passed with unusual slowness. Outside the bank, traffic continued moving through downtown Charlotte as though nothing extraordinary was happening. Inside, however, every eye remained fixed on Leon Richardson and Officer Adam Cooper. Imagine how quickly certainty can become doubt when facts begin arriving one after another. Imagine realizing that confidence without humility can become its own blindfold. Emily's office phone rang again. She answered immediately, listened for only a few seconds, and her expression changed completely. "Yes," she replied quietly. "We understand." She ended the call and walked directly toward Adam. "Officer Cooper," she said carefully, "your police chief is on his way here personally." Adam looked genuinely surprised for the first time that morning. "My chief?" Emily nodded. "He requested that no one leave the building until he arrives." Adam looked back at Leon, searching for some sign that the older man had orchestrated everything. Leon simply folded his hands once more and looked toward the large front windows where flashing reflections from an approaching vehicle briefly shimmered across the polished marble floor. Without changing his calm expression, he spoke softly enough that only those closest could hear. Sometimes the truth does not need to chase anyone. It simply waits for everyone else to catch up. The distant sound of approaching sirens echoed through the busy streets outside the bank before fading into silence. A black police command vehicle came to a smooth stop near the entrance, followed seconds later by another government sedan with discreet federal license plates. Every customer instinctively turned toward the glass doors. Even those who had remained seated throughout the morning slowly stood to get a better view. Officer Adam Cooper straightened his uniform, convinced that the arrival of his commanding officer would quickly validate every decision he had made. He glanced confidently toward Leon Richardson, as if expecting the older man to finally show signs of concern. Instead, Leon calmly adjusted the sleeve of his green jacket and waited without saying a single word. The revolving doors turned slowly. Police Chief Robert Hayes stepped inside with measured purpose, accompanied by two senior officials dressed in dark business suits. The room immediately fell silent. Adam took several quick steps forward. "Chief, thank you for coming. We have a possible fraud investigation involving a large financial transfer." Robert Hayes did not answer immediately. His eyes moved across the lobby until they settled on the older black man standing quietly beside the counter. For one brief moment, time itself seemed to stop. Every expression on the chief's face changed at once. Surprise gave way to recognition. Recognition turned into unmistakable respect. Without hesitation, Robert removed his service cap, walked directly toward Leon Richardson, stopped several feet away, stood perfectly upright, and rendered a formal military salute with complete precision. The entire bank froze. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. The only sound was the faint hum of the building's air conditioning. Customers stared in disbelief. Sophia Mitchell covered her mouth with both hands. Emily Carter felt her heart racing as the realization struck her all at once. The elderly veteran near the entrance immediately stood at attention himself, his eyes widening with recognition. Leon calmly returned the salute before lowering his hand with quiet dignity. "Good morning, Chief Hayes," he said warmly. "I apologize for interrupting your day." Robert shook his head respectfully. "General Richardson, the interruption is ours, not yours." Adam Cooper remained completely motionless. He looked from his chief to Leon and back again, struggling to understand what he had just witnessed. His voice was barely audible. "General, Robert Hayes slowly turned toward Adam. There was disappointment in his expression, but also the weight of responsibility carried by every leader who understood that one poor decision could damage public trust. "Officer Cooper," he said evenly, "allow me to introduce General Leon Richardson, United States Army, 5-star general, retired, recipient of our nation's highest military honors, and one of the most respected leaders ever to wear the uniform of this country." A quiet gasp spread through the lobby. The veteran lowered his head with deep respect. Several customers looked back at Leon with completely different eyes. The ordinary man, wearing a faded green baseball cap, had never tried to impress anyone. He had never announced his rank. He had never demanded special treatment. He had simply waited for the truth to arrive on its own. Robert Hayes continued speaking. "General Richardson has spent a lifetime serving this nation, mentoring military leaders, supporting veterans, and funding scholarships for military families across the United States. The transfer he requested today supports another educational foundation for the children of those who served." Every word seemed heavier than the last. Adam felt the certainty he had carried into the bank disappear beneath the weight of undeniable facts. Imagine believing you understood someone's story after only a few seconds of looking at them, only to discover you had been standing before a living piece of American history. Leon looked around the silent lobby, meeting the eyes of the customers one by one. There was no pride in his expression, no desire to embarrass anyone, only the calm humility that had guided him throughout the entire morning. Then, with the same steady voice that had never once risen in anger, he quietly said, "Rank can earn a salute, but character must earn respect. Those two things are never the same." No one inside the bank spoke for several long seconds. The weight of the revelation settled over the room like complete stillness after a powerful storm. Officer Adam Cooper remained frozen where he stood, his confident posture slowly giving way to disbelief. Only minutes earlier, he had looked at Leon Richardson and seen nothing more than an ordinary older black man wearing a faded green baseball cap and a weathered green jacket. Now he stood face to face with a man whose decades of service had shaped the lives of thousands of American soldiers and military families. Police Chief Robert Hayes lowered his salute and turned toward Adam with the calm but unmistakable authority that every officer recognized. "Officer Cooper," he began, "every member of this department is expected to investigate facts, not assumptions. Today, those expectations were not met." Adam opened his mouth to respond, but found no words. He searched for an explanation that could somehow justify everything that had happened since he entered the bank, yet every sentence disappeared before it reached his lips. The evidence had been there from the beginning. The verified account history, the legitimate documents, the professional conduct, the calm cooperation. None of it had changed his mind because he had reached his conclusion long before the facts arrived. Robert Hayes continued, his voice remaining steady enough for everyone in the lobby to hear. "Authority is never permission to ignore fairness. A badge represents public trust. Once that trust is replaced by personal judgment, the badge begins to lose its meaning." Every customer listened in complete silence. The words were directed toward one officer, but they carried a lesson far beyond the walls of the bank. Emily Carter quietly stepped beside Sophia Mitchell. Neither woman said a word. Both understood they had witnessed something much larger than a banking delay. The elderly veteran near the entrance slowly nodded to himself. He had spent enough years in uniform to know that true leadership often appeared during moments of accountability rather than moments of victory. Robert looked directly at Adam. "Effective immediately. I am relieving you of active duty pending a full administrative review." The statement landed with quiet finality. There was no shouting, no humiliation, no dramatic display. Simply the measured consequence of decisions that had failed to meet the standards of the profession. Adam slowly removed his patrol notebook from his belt and looked down at the polished floor. For the first time that morning, certainty had completely disappeared from his face. He finally spoke, his voice noticeably softer than before. "Chief, I believed I was protecting the public." Robert nodded once. Intent matters, officer, but so does judgment. Our responsibility is to protect every member of the public with equal fairness. Adam lowered his eyes. He could no longer avoid the truth, standing only a few feet away. Leon Richardson had never argued. He had never demanded recognition. He had never used his military rank to gain an advantage. The only person who had transformed the situation into something else had been Adam himself. Imagine carrying years of discipline so quietly that strangers mistake humility for weakness. Imagine discovering that the strongest people often have the least interest in proving who they are. Leon stepped forward with the same calm dignity that had guided him throughout the morning. He looked first at Robert Hayes, then at Adam. "Chief," he said gently, "every mistake creates two choices. Someone can either defend it forever or learn from it today." Robert gave a respectful nod. Adam looked up slowly. There was no anger in Leon's eyes. No satisfaction. No desire for revenge. Only quiet disappointment mixed with unexpected compassion. That expression affected Adam more deeply than any harsh words ever could. In that moment, he began to understand that respect cannot be demanded through authority and dignity cannot be taken away by prejudice. Both must be earned, one decision at a time. Leon Richardson allowed several quiet moments to pass before speaking again. The silence inside the bank no longer felt uncomfortable. It felt reflective, as though every person present had been given an opportunity to reconsider how quickly appearances could shape judgment. Police Chief Robert Hayes remained beside him, waiting respectfully, while Officer Adam Cooper stood with his eyes lowered, listening more carefully than he had at any point that morning. Leon looked toward the customers gathered throughout the lobby. Some had witnessed the entire encounter from the very beginning. Others had entered halfway through and now understood why the atmosphere had become so unusually still. "I've spent my life wearing many uniforms," Leon began softly. "The military taught me discipline. Leadership taught me responsibility. But life taught me something even more important. Every person you meet deserves dignity before they earn your opinion." His words settled gently across the room. No one interrupted. Sophia Mitchell felt her eyes beginning to water as she realized how differently the morning could have unfolded if patience had arrived before assumptions. Emily Carter stepped forward. "General Richardson," she said sincerely, "on behalf of everyone at this bank, I want to apologize for the experience you had today." Leon offered a warm smile. "Thank you, Ms. Carter. I accept your apology." She hesitated before asking, "Would you like us to file a formal complaint regarding everything that happened?" Several people quietly waited for his answer. Adam remained perfectly still. He understood that whatever Leon decided next could shape the rest of his career. Leon looked at the older veteran standing near the entrance before returning his attention to Emily. "No," he answered calmly. "I would rather leave behind a lesson than another argument." Robert Hayes nodded with quiet admiration. He had worked in law enforcement for decades, and he knew how rare it was to see someone respond to public embarrassment with grace instead of bitterness. Leon continued, "Accountability is necessary. Training is necessary. Better judgment is necessary. But resentment has never built a stronger community." Adam slowly lifted his eyes. For the first time since entering the bank, he looked directly at Leon without suspicion, without certainty, and without pride. He simply saw another human being. "General Richardson," he said quietly, "I owe you an apology." Leon met his gaze. "Yes," he replied gently, "but not because of my rank." Adam swallowed before continuing. "I judged you before I knew anything about you. I should have listened instead of assuming." Leon gave a small nod. "That is an important difference. Imagine how different our communities could become if people chose curiosity before conclusions. Imagine how many unnecessary conflicts would disappear if respect came first and assumptions came last." The elderly veteran slowly walked over and extended his hand toward Leon. "General, it is an honor to meet you again, even if you probably do not remember me." Leon smiled warmly as they shook hands. Every person who served beside this nation deserves to be remembered. The veteran's eyes filled with gratitude. Around the lobby, Customers quietly began applauding. It was not loud or theatrical. It was sincere. The applause was not simply for a decorated military leader. It was for the dignity he had protected without ever raising his voice. Emily returned to the transaction counter and smiled. "General Richardson, whenever you are ready, we would be honored to complete your donation." Leon picked up his worn leather portfolio and adjusted the faded green baseball cap that had never changed throughout the morning. "Thank you," he said. "That scholarship fund is far more important than anything that happened here today. Somewhere, a young student is waiting for an opportunity. I would rather spend my energy helping that future than reliving this morning." As Sophia finalized the transfer, the confirmation appeared on her screen. The donation had been successfully completed, and with a simple press of a button, Leon fulfilled the purpose that had brought him into the bank long before anyone knew his name. As the final confirmation receipt printed from the bank's terminal, the tension that had filled the lobby throughout the morning quietly disappeared. Customers slowly returned to their conversations, parents gathered their children, and employees resumed their work. But something invisible had changed. Everyone who walked out of that building would carry the memory of what they had witnessed long after the transaction itself had been forgotten. Leon Richardson carefully placed the receipt inside his worn leather portfolio, adjusted the brim of his faded green baseball cap, and thanked Sophia Mitchell for her professionalism. "I hope that scholarship helps someone discover a future they never thought possible," he said with a warm smile. Sophia nodded. "I believe it will, General." Leon gently shook his head. "Today, I would rather simply be remembered as Leon." Those words stayed with everyone who heard them. Police Chief Robert Hayes walked beside Leon toward the front entrance. Before the doors opened, he stopped and extended his hand. "General Richardson, thank you for your patience today. We will learn from this." Leon accepted the handshake with quiet respect. "Chief Hayes, every profession faces difficult moments. What matters is whether those moments become excuses or lessons." Robert nodded. "They will become lessons." A few feet away, Adam Cooper remained standing where he had been relieved of duty. His thoughts were no longer consumed by defending his decisions. Instead, he replayed every moment from that morning, realizing how many opportunities he had ignored to ask one more question, listen 1 minute longer, or simply allow facts to arrive before reaching a conclusion. The realization was uncomfortable, but it was also honest. Sometimes the hardest lesson is not discovering that another person was extraordinary. It is discovering that our own assumptions were ordinary. As Leon prepared to leave, Adam took several careful steps forward. "Mr. Richardson," he said quietly. Leon turned. "Yes, officer." Adam hesitated before speaking. "Thank you for showing me more grace than I earned today." Leon offered the same calm smile that had never left his face. Grace is not earned. It is given. That is why it has the power to change people. Adam lowered his head respectfully. There was nothing else to say. Some apologies begin with words. The most meaningful ones begin with change behavior. Outside, the afternoon sun reflected across the city streets as Leon walked toward a waiting sedan. He carried no sense of victory. He had not entered the bank to prove anyone wrong or to reveal his military career. His purpose had always been exactly the same as when he first stepped through the doors that morning, helping the children of military families receive an education that could transform their lives. The misunderstanding had never changed that mission. It had only revealed the character with which he pursued it. Imagine meeting someone whose greatest achievement was not the rank they once held, but the humility they carried after earning it. Imagine living in a community where every first impression was replaced by one genuine conversation. How many lives would be different? How many misunderstandings would never happen? The customers who witnessed that morning would later tell their families about the quiet man in the green baseball cap who never raised his voice, never demanded recognition, and never allowed someone else's prejudice to determine his own character. They would remember that true strength often speaks softly, and real honor rarely announces itself before it arrives. Long after the police vehicles departed and the bank returned to its normal routine, one lesson remained stronger than every assumption that had filled the room only hours earlier. A uniform may symbolize authority, a title may command respect, and a badge may represent responsibility. But none of them can replace the simple discipline of seeing another human being with fairness before judgment. Because the strongest people do not spend their lives proving who they are. They spend their lives giving others a reason to become better than they were yesterday. Please like and subscribe to the channel to hear more stories of justice.